This is Francisco Perez. Welcome to another educational lesson.
In the last scenes of a very famous movie, The Lost Ark of the Covenant, the box that once held the Ten Commandments is crated and abandoned in the basement of a warehouse. What if Hollywood's depiction accurately reflects reality? This would mean that hiding somewhere, there's tangible proof of the story the Bible calls the Exodus, the deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt, led by the prophet Moses. Well, right here in this building, there's a 3,500-year-old gold image carved, perhaps by an eyewitness to the biblical Exodus, of the lost Ark of the Covenant, and the people in there don't realize it. Exodus. For thousands of years, the biblical epic has captured the human imagination. But did it really happen?
When it comes to the Exodus, we have no evidence that it happened, and a good deal of evidence that it didn't. They made it up.
Painstaking excavation. Under 150 feet of sand and rock, they discovered the ancient tomb of Pt1.
Something must have happened. I can't explain what happened, but it shaped ancient Israel's identity, and therefore I can't dismiss it as a fairy tale.
In the famed Valley of the Kings, where 60 Egyptian pharaohs were buried amidst the splendor the world has never equaled, archaeologists...
What can you dig up which is going to prove the Exodus? What would you have to find in order to prove the Exodus?
The Exodus story is at the very heart of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. For thousands of years, believers have treated it as historical fact. But in the past few decades, scholars have called the story a fairy tale. I'm James Cameron, and I know a filmmaker who for nearly a decade has been on a mission to answer a 3,000-year-old question. Is the Exodus fact or fiction? His name is Simcha Jakubowicz, and he's a two-time Emmy winner in investigative journalism. He claims that scholars have missed the archaeological evidence that's hiding in plain sight. More than that, he seems to have come up with the goods by putting together the long-forgotten pieces of the ultimate archaeological mystery.
How did we do it? By tracking down experts from a variety of disciplines who rarely, if ever, talk to each other. None of them fully subscribes to our take on the story, but many possess critical pieces of the puzzle. What emerges challenge even the most skeptical. But before we show you the evidence, let's start the story at the beginning. The biblical tale begins when the Hebrew patriarch Jacob escapes drought in the land of Canaan, modern Israel, and moves to the land of plenty, the land of the pyramids, ancient Egypt. There, Jacob's clan, the future Israelites, flourish in their new environment. In fact, Jacob's son, Joseph, became as powerful as the rulers of Egypt, the pharaohs. And yet, after Joseph dies, his people are enslaved by the ruling Egyptians. More than a century later, the Egyptians became afraid of revolution and instituted a policy of drowning all the Israelite male infants. It was at this point Jacob's great-great-grandson was born. To avoid death, the infant was hidden in the bulrushes, where he was found by Pharaoh's daughter. The princess adopted him and named him Moses. When Moses grew up, he sided with his oppressed brethren and fled into the desert. 60 years later, he returned to utter the unforgettable cry, "Let my people go." 10 times Pharaoh said no to Moses, and 10 times God struck Egypt with catastrophic plagues, ultimately killing all Egyptian firstborn males. Finally, Pharaoh let the Israelites go, but then changed his mind and pursued Moses and his followers to the edge of the sea. It looked like the Israelites were trapped. But then the impossible happened. The sea parted, and the Israelites crossed to safety. Moses now led his followers to Mount Sinai, where they received the 10 Commandments, the sacred laws they would take with them to the Promised Land. Most scholars believe this story is a myth. So even when the evidence is staring them in the face, they ignore it. The most dramatic example of this took place in 1947, when archaeologist Henri Chevrier found pieces of a broken stone monument, or stela, dating to a pharaoh named Ahmose, around 1500 before the Common Era, or BCE. Incredibly, the Ahmose stela is covered in hieroglyphic inscriptions that mirror the biblical tale. Today, it lies abandoned in the basement of the Cairo Museum, and all our attempts to get access to it were unsuccessful. So using Chevrier's published description, we reconstructed the stela and got one of the world's leading Egyptologists to comment on it.
We have this very interesting stela, which is dated to the reign of Ahmose. It records a tremendous catastrophe that happened to Egypt. We're not quite clear what it was, but it involved rain and thunder and lightning and such a storm that rarely happens in Northeast Africa. I mean, that's a dry area. It sounds peculiar to me that the biblical tradition preserves the memory of plagues, which involve climatic cataclysms. And here we have, from the very time, this curious stela.
This curious stela may in fact hold the key to the Exodus enigma. Let's take a closer look. Bible says that at the time of the Exodus, there was a great storm. Ahmose Stella also talks of a great storm. The Bible says darkness descended on Egypt. The Stella says that Egypt was enveloped in darkness. The Stella then says something very peculiar. Though the Egyptians worshipped many gods, on this stela it is written that the storm and the darkness happened when God, in the singular, manifested his power. The Bible describes Pharaoh, but never names him. Because of this stela, we now know his name, Ahmose. And now that we know who he is, maybe it's time that we met him. This is the Cairo Museum, home to some of the most famous mummies ever unearthed. We came here in search of Pharaoh Ahmose, the man who we believe is the Pharaoh of the Exodus.
You want to flash that thing?
At first, we couldn't locate him, but we did locate his father, Second Henry Tao II. If we are right, this is one of the pharaohs who oppressed the Israelites. According to most scholars, his skull had been crushed by enemy axes. Perhaps those enemies were Israelites, smashing his mummy as they left on the Exodus. We continued on our search for Ahmose. It was hard to locate him because he had been sort of misfiled. But we did locate one of his two wives under some debris in one of the museum's workshops.
Hi, is it possible to reveal the wife of Ahmose? Just don't move it without supporting.
According to our calculations, this somewhat discarded glass coffin contains the mummy of a woman whose husband contended with Moses and hardened his heart to God himself. At last we located Pharaoh Ahmose. Here is the man who confronted Moses. Can it be that Ahmose's father remembered the Israelite prince he grew up with, and when he gave his son his Egyptian name, Ahmose, the moon is born, he chose the name because of a play on words. In Hebrew, Ahmose means the brother of Moses.
The brother of Moses.
In history, Pharaoh Ahmose is most famous for expelling a foreign nation from Egypt around 1500 BCE. At the time, Egypt was ruled by a people that the ancients called Hyksos.
Okay, so if you watch Zion Lex, and if you study biblical history, and if you understand mainstream history will tell you certain things and will send you in the wrong direction, send you in different time periods. Zion Lex saying that can prove that these things probably happened if we're using the timelines 1400 BC. Okay, they're saying that these Hyksos people came around the time of Joseph, and they lived in the city where the Hebrews and Joseph supposedly lived, Alvarez. So there might be a connection to them being of Semitic origin, seeing as the Arabs never have afros. Only the you cannot find Canaanite people with afros unless they have mixed with the one of our, mixed with our nations. as we can see in Josephus, he says that the tribe of Judah was lighter skinned, and many other tribes had different tones of brown, variations of brown. Just the phenotypes always stayed the same in the Afro. So other nations, other civilizations, they never have racism like we have today, because the populations consisted of all variations of brown, even a paler people. But what we went by was by your phenotypes. So we wasn't never really went by the skin color. So there was different variations within communities, but we all looked alike, just different colors, different shades of brown. So we're gonna go on this